You're listening to ESOPOD, the Foliance ESOP podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for joining me on ESOPOD, the Foliance ESOP podcast. I am your host, Sean Hoy, and today I'm joined by Matt Bryant. How are you doing today?
I am good.
So Matt, you are the publisher for a number of publications, right?
Yep, I think we have 13 titles that we're in charge of down this area.
Wow.
So,
Would you say is the Southeast Iowa Union kind of the main flagship?
yep, Southeast Iowa Union, that's kind of where it all started. To go way back, even before Foliance owned us, it started with Mount Pleasant News. Well, all these papers are over 100 years old, so I mean, it started way back when, right? So, but as far as Foliance bought the Golden Triangle in 2016, at the very end of 2016, so effectively 2017. But the Golden Triangle started with Mount Pleasant, and then later Washington came on board, and then Fairfield. So when we were purchased by Foliance, we were those three newspapers. And those three newspapers were, independent daily, or not independent, we were all owned by the same people, but they were their own standalone daily papers. And then in 2019, I believe, we kind of merged them together to form the Southeast Iowa Union. So really that's the nucleus of where we are today.
How long have you been with the company?
Well, I've been, I was here when Foliance bought us, but I started in Washington in 2009. So 15 years? I think that adds up to. My math's right. I don't get paid to do math. I get paid to do other things. So, but I've been here 15 years, and prior to that, I was in Northern Iowa for about 10 years and publisher of a couple papers up there. So.
Okay, so how long have you been involved in the paper industry?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question because actually I am actually a fifth generation. I have a little chart on my wall actually to remind me, so I'm looking at that. Fifth generation newspaper publisher in Iowa. Somebody in my family has owned and or published a newspaper since 1894, something like that, or well over 100 years. Actually, my great-great-grandfather had the Sigourney newspaper, and he had, sorry, I'm kind of getting on a tangent here, but he had 7 children, 5 boys. All 5 of them were newspaper publishers. My great-grandmother married a gentleman who owned a newspaper, and then my grandfather, and then my father, and now me have all been in the newspaper business pretty much consecutively for over 100 years.
That's pretty incredible.
So when you ask when I started, it's a loaded question, right?
Yeah. Are you from Eastern Iowa?
I am. I grew up in Centerville, Iowa, which is actually South Central Iowa. But yeah, spent most of my time in Eastern Iowa. Lived in Monticello for a while, which is just east of Cedar Rapids a little bit, as you know. And then went to college in Mount Pleasant at Iowa Wesleyan. Then had a couple non-newspaper related jobs and kind of migrated back to this. But and then I was in Cresco, Iowa, which is northeast Iowa, Cresco and New Hampton, and then I came here in 2009. So pretty much South Central and Eastern Iowa my whole life. Yeah.
I was going to ask what led you to the newspaper industry, but that might be kind of in your blood.
Well, it is. And actually, my first job out of college, I worked at Hormel in Fremont, Nebraska. And I was a line supervisor for people cutting up pigs and processing meat. And then I went to IBP in Waterloo, and that was all processing, cutting up pigs. And, I spent about 18 months between those two places, so not very long at either one. But it's about as long as it took me to think, you know what, this is probably not my life path. And my dad owned a little shopper in Monticello, and I kind of showed up at his door and said, well, I'm unemployed, so can you help me out? And he gave me a job, and it kind of started from there for me.
So all these papers that you are related to in your family, have they all been kind of small community papers?
Yep, they've all been small. Centerville, when my grandpa had Centerville, it was a 5 or 6 day a week paper, but Centerville's 6,000 people or less, and Washington is population 7,000 or 7,200. Um, Fairfield population's right around 10. Mount Pleasant's just a little less than that. So basically, all towns under 10,000, and generally a little smaller than that. So.
And for the most part, Southeast Iowa Union has also been a 6 or 7 day paper, I think, up until this last year.
Yeah. When I got, so they used to be a 6 day paper, all of them, Washington, Mount Pleasant, Fairfield, and then actually by the time I got here, they were all 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And then we just switched over in January of this year. We dropped to 2 days a week, and the rest of the titles are all weekly.
Gotcha. I was gonna ask you, so why do you think it's important to keep all of these small little community papers around?
Well, a variety of reasons. One is, like I said, it's kind of in my blood. It's not. I don't want see any newspaper close. And ironically, my great grandfather, my grandfather owned the Centerville paper forever, and it closed during COVID. It's owned by a larger company now, and they made the decision to close it. So that kind of broke my heart. Um, but I didn't have anything to do with it at that time. That was something completely different. But um, I just think it's important. All these towns, it's a changing industry. It's a challenging industry now, trying to pull the right levers to make everything work. But I just think that the newspaper, the schools, that kind of stuff are just important identity to the community. I truly believe there has to be a credible news source. So many people these days are I hear it all the time. I'm getting all my news on Facebook. Well, you're not getting news on Facebook. You're getting somebody's opinion or somebody's take, and you're getting fed what somebody else wants to feed you, right? So I just think it's important that all these papers, puts out credible news about the community. And it doesn't even have to be hard news. It doesn't have to be, hey, the city council decided to close this street or do whatever. It can be, we did a story once in Mount Pleasant about, I think she was a 96-year-old lady, and she still was in a bowling league. Those are fun. Those are good stories about the communities that people live in. And, even the Gazette, and, love the Gazette, obviously. It's our parent company. But, they're not coming to Winfield, Iowa and doing stories about people. It's just, they can't, right? I mean, it's just not how they're built. But we can still tell those stories when we're in those towns, and we are in those towns. And the other part of that, and no less important, and maybe even more so important, is, we do go to city council meetings, we do go to school board meetings, and we do go to those things. And, I think we have good people here, but it keeps them honest, right? And, we're a government watchdog to a level. We don't make it to every meeting. But there are stories out there, not anywhere around here, but where the newspapers have folded up, and the city council suddenly gives themselves really big raises, and, kind of makes the votes that kind of in the dark, right? Where the people that they represent don't know what's happening. And I think, that's a very important service, or I don't know what the right word is, service that we provide.
Yeah, that definitely is a service, I think, because otherwise you would have to go to the meetings yourself.
Right.
I don't think people have time to do that.
Well, they don't have time, and frankly, most city council meetings are, pretty boring, frankly. If they're talking about the street in front of your house or something happened in downtown, that's important to you. But if they're talking about a sewer upgrade on the other side of town, you don't really want to sit through that, right? Well, we do. So, it matters, and I think we matter. It's challenging to, I don't want to say convince people of that, but to have people understand that what we do is important to them, even if the story isn't particularly about them necessarily.
Do you think the model that you've kind of made for being a union or like a grouping of newspapers has advantages for those small towns?
Well, it does for sure, because in fact, some of the papers we bought, the people that we bought them from said, hey, if you guys don't buy it, we're going to close it. By being a group, and we're clustered, we're really in two clusters, right? We're in the Southeast Iowa Union, and then we have the Central Iowa Union, which really aren't that far apart, but two separate clusters. But we're able to have, uh, share staff, right? We have advertising people that do that, but we own several papers that couldn't support their own staff, right? But we have news writers in the area, we have advertising people in the area. Frankly, even what you're doing with shared services, we have to have those services that, some of these little communities and little papers couldn't support on their own. So by us doing this and having clusters, we're able to keep those papers going where they probably wouldn't be able to stay go if they're still independent.
So I know you said you're in these communities. Some places we have like a physical presence there.
Right.
Others you're in the council meetings. Are there other ways that you're engaged in those small communities?
Well, we try to cover all their events. We try to do the stuff again. Brighton, and I bring this up. Brighton's 10 miles south of Washington. We don't have a paper there specifically, but I like to say this: they have an annual festival, and it's called Whoopie Days, right? Well, we're at Whoopie Days, and we cover it, and we got some stories out of there, and we are in the community, and they're very proud of their festival, as they should be. But we're able to cover that. And again, the TV stations aren't doing that. Nobody else is doing that. We're the ones that are in these communities. So we do have a presence that way. We are reporting on their stories and the things that are important to them. We do try to go to city council meetings. We don't make every city council meeting. We cover a lot of towns, so we can't make every one of them. But again, we're kind of the watchdog. That if something were to happen, we would be there, right? Um, so we engage in them that way. In a couple of our towns in New London, for example, we have two ladies that just love the newspaper. They're not employees of ours; they're contractors, but they write most of the news for that paper because they live there, they love it, they want to make sure the paper still goes, and they are in the community on a daily basis. Everybody knows who they are. So we reach out in different ways, or we're involved in the community in different ways that way.
How many staff do you have total for Southeast Iowa Union and the
Central,
Eastern Iowa,
Central Iowa. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we have 14 or 15 full time right now, covering all 11 or all 13 of those titles.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
almost a person per publication.
Pretty much. 2 of those are shoppers, by the way. We have 11 newspapers and 2 shoppers.
Okay. What is a shopper? How would you describe that?
A shopper is it's all advertising. It goes out free. You don't have to buy a subscription for it. We send those out. We have the Southeast Iowa Shopper. We send out 27,000 copies of that every week through the mail, and in the hometown marketplace in their Central Iowa is about 14,000. But it's all advertising and no subscription. You get those. Everybody gets one in their mailbox.
Great. So you mentioned that industry is changing, and I think it's hard to deny that.
Right.
I know that you specifically have a video network that you started.
Yeah.
I watched some of those, and so you're kind of already doing what I'm doing. What I'm starting is like a podcast type or video.
Right.
How did you get into that?
Well, honestly, I have a buddy of mine in Centerville that was in radio for a long time, and then he decided to he met with a partner, and they decided to start their own video network. They're heavy sports. They do a lot of live sports coverage, which we don't do as much of. We may get there, but they started it. They were doing good things. It seemed like a good marriage for us because it's still selling advertising, right? And we're already talking to those people. It's all advertising supported. So, and it's just a different avenue to reach people. I talk to my salespeople all the time about audience, right? We're selling an audience. We're not selling a newspaper. We're not selling a video show. We're selling the audience. Well, we're reaching the audience in different ways. Not everybody, and we know this, and everybody knows this, not everybody subscribes to the newspaper. Fewer people subscribe to the newspaper now than they did even 10 years ago, probably 5 years ago. So this is just a different way to reach the advertiser, or to reach the audience, I should say. But then we can go, and when we talk to our advertising clients, hey, you're not looking to reach just the newspaper people. You're looking to reach the Washington audience, for example. And you can do that through the newspaper. You can do that through our website. You can do that through video. So we just want to deliver the audience. And, inform, educate, and entertain the audience in whatever way they choose to look at it, right? Whether it's in print or on video.
What different shows do you have running on that?
Well, we do kind of our flagship show is our morning show. We call it Morning Breath, and that is, frankly, it's more for entertainment purposes than news. Um, but we do put some. We do, we're talking about local events and local things happening, and we have a segment at the end that we always, we do the weather. That's 5 days a week. We do that Monday through Friday, and we do it at 7:15 a.m. So we're trying to catch people before they go to work. So we do the weather, and then we talk about events coming up in those towns. But a lot of it, frankly, is just fun, and we talk about weird stuff. Today we we learned that there is a bat in Korea, I think, or Thailand, that is the world's smallest mammal, and its body is like 1.5 inches long, but its wingspan is 5 inches. And that's not relevant, but it is. It's interesting.
That's cool.
So we do that. We also we do get more into the community building and the news side of things. We do a weekly in Washington, Mount Pleasant. We do what we call Washington Live and Mount Pleasant Live, and that's where we interview local newsmakers, the chamber directors, or if there's an event coming up, we'll get whoever's directing that. Those are 15 to 30-minute interviews once a week, and really try to keep in touch with the community. And the people that are actually making things happen in the communities. We do a news break show where we kind of summarize the newspaper. We do that twice a week. That's just about 15 minutes each. And then my sports guys like to talk, and they have a lot to talk about. So we turn them loose for an hour a week or so and let them talk about all the local high school sports. So those are the shows that we have right now. Like I said, we might get into more live sports at some point, but we're not quite there yet.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I think we might have already touched on this, but are there any ways that you have seen a shift in how you need to present news to people? And have you leaned more heavily on digital? I know the Gazette has definitely done that.
Right. We still have most of our traffic through newspaper. We're in small rural Iowa communities. They tend to be a little older demographically than a lot of places. So we still have a lot of people that rely on the newspaper, but we do get, and I can't tell you the numbers off the top of my head. I probably should know them better, but we get decent traffic to our website. Our video shows have some traction. So people are watching those as well. So, the majority of our audience is still newspaper, but we know that that's going to shift even more over time than it already has. So that's why we have these other avenues. We want to make sure that we can, we shift with them as they go. So we still are the trusted news source, right? I probably stole that tagline from somebody, but, but we still want to be the place where people come for credible news.
Do you get a lot of people that just kind of walk in off the street to just chat about the community?
Really not very much. And you kind of mentioned this before. We don't have offices in all our communities. We have offices right now in Mount Pleasant, Fairfield, and Washington. And then we do have an office in Marengo as well, which is the Central Iowa hub. So we do get some walk-in traffic. We don't really get a lot of walk-in traffic, whether it's for news or anything else. So many people now just want to shoot you an email, or we still get the phone calls and still get that stuff. But our offices are not, they're important. They're not overly busy, if I can say that, right?
Sure. Yeah, I'm sure it's, especially since COVID, I know that.
Yeah.
Kind of cut down on foot traffic everywhere.
It did. We opened up relatively quickly, and we tried to stay open as much as we could. That COVID shifted the world for everybody, right? But we tried to be here. Even little things, somebody wants to buy a $6 classified ad, and they don't want to talk to somebody on the phone, and they sure as heck aren't going to do it by email or whatever. So we still think it's important to be there for those people. There's not near as many as there used to be, but it's important. So,
do you have any interesting or funny stories that you can recall from your time at the paper? Like,
Well,
what's the
yeah,
weirdest story or
well, I got a couple. Sometimes, especially in small town, which is why I love it, frankly. But uh, a few different things. I one time had somebody call me up and from a county nursing home, and they said, "You need to come out here. Bring a camera." I'm like, "Okay," and I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I just went out there. Well, they were in the kitchen making lunch, and they cut open a tomato, and the tomato, it had the seeds inside the tomato were in the perfect shape of a heart, and they thought that should be in the paper. So we took a picture and we put it in the paper. I've had somebody else at one time said, and this is not at these papers, it's a different paper, but we had a back door in an alley, and they said, "Come back here. You need to see something." So I went out in the back, and they opened the trunk, and God only knows what could have been in that trunk. I had no idea. But he opened it up, and it was the biggest turkey I'd ever seen. And he had shot this turkey, and he was so proud of it, and he just wanted us to see it. So, you wouldn't put that in, the New York Times isn't running turkey pictures in their pages, right? But we did, and I've had people come in with just buckets full of morel mushrooms because they found a honey hole and wanted to show it off, and then kind of on the opposite end of that, I think it's funny. The person on the other end of the phone probably didn't, but we used to run all traffic citations and stuff. We did a list in the paper of whoever got traffic citations, um, among other things. But he called up, and he called me one day, and he was just madder than he could be. And he says, "You ran that I got a ticket for $75, and that's not right." And I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry, what happened?" And he goes, "Well, my ticket was only $55 and not $75." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry. We shouldn't have done that." And he goes, "What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "Well, here's what I recommend." I said, "I apologize. You should probably just let that go. I can run a correction if you really want me to, but that's just going to bring it back to in front of people. You should probably, take my apology and just let that ride." And he just kept going on and on and on about how we screwed this up. And he did speed. We messed up. We replaced a 5 with a 7. And I finally said, "Okay, here's my solution for you. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to put a big headline. I'm going to put it around the front page. We messed up. So-and-so didn't get a ticket for $75. His ticket was only for $55. And I will make sure that's on the front page so everybody sees that we messed up and you got this ticket." "Well, no, don't do that." I said, "Well, those are your options." I said, "We can just let this slide and take my apology, or I'm going to put it on the front page of the paper." Well, he was fine with just letting it slide after that. So um, just lots of interesting stories that way.
I saw on one of the websites, I think it was for Washington, there was just a announcement about someone's birthday party, like
Mm-hmm.
some nice old lady's birthday party, and it's really cool that you're at the scale where you can kind of include those things, where people can pay and people will
Yep.
see that and have it be relevant to them.
Well, I think, you asked how we interact with the community and what makes us important. And I think that's the thing that makes us important, right? We are at that scale, that stuff is important, and that's what our readers want to see. And I think that's cool.
Thanks for listening to ESOPOD. If you want to get in touch, send me an email at esopod@foliance.com.